Generational grace. This is where I get this topic from. Before I start, let me say that I haven't been feeling too well, so if my voice sounds a little low and a little slow, that's the reason. Here's the thing and where I got this topic from, because it touches on some things I'm going through as well, but I won't go into mine because I just like the reason I'm going to give for this one. I think you should handle some things offline. It's no secret if you've been watching the news and keeping up with the Olympics, which I sort of have. The Paralympics haven't happened yet, and everybody else is just getting back. And my condolences, by the way, to Jordan Childs, Anna Barbosu, and Sabrina Vonea for the mess that happened in Paris. Neither of those three girls deserved what happened to them. Or women, for that matter, because they're adults, really, some of them. So Simone Biles comes home after her third Olympics, Rio being her first in 2016, Tokyo 2021, which covered 2020 because of the pandemic, and recently got back from Paris. Whether she'll do Los Angeles or not, who knows, but these days you can be in your 30s and still be a gymnast. Her mother comes out in an interview showing the dilapidated home she's living in and said, when Simone's ready to talk to me, she can come and talk to me. And this was a woman that was known in the throes of addiction to have not been that good of a parent, allegedly. We all don't really know the whole story, so I'm not going to sit here and judge Shannon Biles. In time, I think is Ron and Nellie Biles. I think that's her father's name. Her grandparents adopted her and raised her as their own. And I think one of her sisters as well, that's who she calls mom and dad, who they call their mother and their father. So here's what I said online and on somebody else's page, and I stick with this comment. Whatever happened between those two, it was just not a good look for Shannon Biles to do an interview and put her business out on display. It was the optics. Because you conveniently waited to do this exclusive after your biological child has won 3 Olympics. It's not the first time she's spoken out. It's the first time that she sat and did an interview. And I've always said, if you truly want reconciliation with someone, that's something that you do in private. Because those media outlets know better. They knew what they were doing when they approached her. We're doing this old poor Shannon Biles. The issue I have with that is that since she's clean and in her better frame of mind, my thing is, why didn't you, when they approached you, said no comment, thank you, and just left it at that? If you're living in worse conditions than the children that you gave up for a number of reasons, and those children become famous, and really this argument can transcend to friendships and anything, why would you wait until that person is famous to then come back and say, oh, I would like to have been a part of this. I should have been a part of this. Pardon the burp. I'm a little bit silent because this one is a doozy. I think it's none of our business whether Simone does or doesn't forgive her mother, though it would be nice if she did and it was done in private. But it's really none of our business. This should have never been put online. But some people brought up something that is close to my heartstrings because I don't deal with certain relatives either who are older than me. But I'm going to ask you all a question. On a case-by-case basis, should we extend generational grace? What I mean is that your mother and your grandmother or your father or grandfather, uncles, aunts, and extended family who were born prior to the World Wide Web and prior to the 21st century, okay, had it harder and went through hardships that we can't imagine. They have suppressed trauma that we couldn't imagine. Is it possible that you suffered as a child based on something that your parents just did not have the heart to tell you because they're still trying to deal with whatever trauma that was inflicted on them? We know the sad cases when your parents beat you with things they shouldn't have, thrown objects at you as a kid. They were in the throes of their addiction and let you not have food in the fridge, didn't feed you. Some molestation came out of it, some kind of raping or something bad. They married somebody that was touching you inappropriately, things like that. But how about the trauma we don't discuss? The fact that they may have grown up in a happy home also, and one parent passed away and they never dealt with that trauma, or a childhood friend drowned, or they have a great family home but were relentlessly bullied at school, but their parents didn't make enough money to take them out of that school, and therefore they were subjected to that kind of bullying. And you would think, oh, you shouldn't give those people power over you. That's on a case-by-case basis. Were they locked in lockers as a prank? That's traumatizing because that's a confined space. Were they beat up on a daily basis while also having a disability? People were unkind back then. And I think the reason people are coming for Shannon Biles is because their compassion for her was that crack epidemic in the 80s and 90s greatly messed up the black community. Should she be given grace for things that she may not have said in the past? And I know this one is a hard one, because you don't necessarily want to subject your children and your grandchildren to your trauma. But sometimes when you withheld things, while I understand that that is your trauma and that's what you chose to deal with, this new generation doesn't understand what's going on with you, and it can breed resentment. I can say with absolute certainty that as much as I loved my grandma, in the last couple of years before she was dying, there was a short period where I resented her because I felt like she still had plenty of time to tell us certain things. But right before she died, I made peace with the fact that she was going to go to the grave with things. There was a lot of unanswered questions on that side of the family, but that's the side that I'm closest to. This innate shame that I may have judged for certain things, and people now that are still alive can only give bits and pieces. But particularly in the black community, when my grandma was 30 something years old, there was no World Wide Web. When my dad was in his 30s, the World Wide Web was on its way. By the time I'm 30, there's a Facebook, there's a YouTube. And people say, well, what that have to do with anything? Because information spreads faster. We are now hyper aware that someone may have suppressed trauma from something simple as a doctor touched you inappropriately years ago to you went to a sleepover and someone did something and you never talked about it. The thing about it is I can believe Simone's mother had trauma. I just don't believe of the way she handled it. Optics are still important here. So whatever's going on in you all's life based on stories you heard from your family back in the day. Because I can say that I heard some not so good things about my great grandfather who served in World War One. But the reason it was easier for me to extend him generational grace is because, unlike him, I also served, but the U.S. Navy in the early 2000s was an entirely different cookie than it was World War One, because he served in the Army when he was in the Army. By the time he was getting ready to pass away, the Department of Veteran Affairs had formed. I've only known the Department of Veteran Affairs and all of their benefits my whole life. So imagine coming back, you're likely a shell-shocked black American person. And you think no one really cares. And I believe that the things he did subsequently had a lot to do with him acting out, had a lot to do with the fact that he had no resources, that as a young man born to Victorian era parents, what we call the Gilded Age, you just suppress things. You don't air your dirty laundry. You don't talk about it even in private. You just keep up and carry on and act like it didn't happen. There's a diminishing return to that attitude, though. Either way, I am a believer in extending generational grace, and I'm preparing to do that with people I'm ready to forgive in my family on my mom's side for things that the way that I thought I was treated. But at the same time, while we say that grace should be extended, that grace doesn't mean you should continue in the bad behavior that ran that family member off in the first place. Further, you have to take responsibility and culpability for the role you play in things. Because you have a responsibility to that role, whether you believe that or not. I'm hoping at this point that aspect of this makes sense. What do you all think about extending generational grace? Please leave a comment. Let me know. Thanks.